Hello and welcome to the Warrior Insights channel, where today's topic of discussion is Take Back Women's Sports and Locker Rooms. Before I begin, I'd like to remind you that this video corresponds with my Substack article, which may be found at athenaangelique.substack.com. If you have any articles of interest you'd like me to review, please send them to warriorinsights1@gmail.com. Many of you may have a teenage daughter in school who's competed her entire adolescent life in a sport and has done very well for herself. Well, what if it's her senior year and she's competing for scholarships and she has to compete against a transgender man who identifies as a woman? Well, that's what's happening across the United States. Girls who are being replaced on the winner's podium by boys who identify as girls at all levels of their sport. It's prompted Idaho, Arkansas, Mississippi, and 23 other states to enact bills to protect female athletes. But what if she lives in California or Connecticut? Are her scholarship opportunities over? Well, maybe. This article was published 3 years ago, but have we made any strides since then? Well, on March 7th, just a few days ago, the Minnesota court ruled that the USA Powerlifting Organization must allow trans athletes to compete against women in powerlifting. And this is very important to me because not only have I competed in sports nearly my entire school-age life and even up until now, and I have been a master personal trainer for over 20 years. And we have to acknowledge that there are clear differences between men and women, especially in genetics. For example, take a look at this chart. These are the differences between male and female world records, mostly to deal with track and field. And you could see that the difference ranges from 9% in the 100 meters to 21% in the pole vault. So clearly there's a difference in track and field sports. And these results alone should give a solid rationale for why there should be separate sex categories. So we can't just look at track and field athletes, but in general, this is mirrored across other sports to include cycling and swimming. There's a continuum of performance results between the biological sexes, and the average female and the average male differ substantially. They differ in muscular strength. They found men have 30 to 40% more muscle mass than females. The material or muscle fibers actually differ between men and women, and that males have a higher proportion of type 2 fibers. Men and women vary in size and structure of the skeleton. The female body is set up to produce less force in running, jumping, and throwing. And all these characteristics contribute towards what can be termed as muscular power. Men can jump around 25% higher, punch around 30% harder, accelerate 20% faster, and throw around 25% further. And it's not just with records of strength and power we see sex differences. Men have larger lung capacity, greater cardiac output, and show greater resistance to injury. This is not debatable, okay? This is real life. This is genetics right here. You can see in this picture, the skull is larger in males. Male shoulder width is wider and higher. Female carry angle. The female thorax is narrower, the male torso is shorter, etc. There are physical differences. These are facts. We cannot change facts, okay, just because of the way we feel. The facts are facts, okay? Then let's look at powerlifting. This is the sport that I compete in, and it's very clear. These are the results of the 2023 Arnold Strong Woman and Strongman Classic. This is the same lift with the same rules. This is men and this is women. And you could see by looking at the results, these are the strongest people on earth that come and compete in these competitions. the difference between the weakest, which I wouldn't even say is weak at all, male powerlifter in the elephant bar deadlift is 801 pounds, and the strongest female lifter of the competition deadlifted 651 pounds. We have a 150-pound difference between the weakest man and the strongest woman on the platform. And I guaranteed if you did this experiment over and over again, it would be the same result. Maybe not a 150-pound difference, but there's going to be a very significant difference in the weight lifted between men and women. Just look at these people. This is Bobby Thompson, number one in his field. And this is Victoria Long, the winner of the Arnold Strongwoman Classic. They are very different. Now, coming to the USA powerlifting stance on transgender athletes, they talk about the aforementioned genetic differences that I just talked about, and they cite the IPF acceptance of International Olympic Committee guidelines on inclusion of transgender individuals in competition. But the IOC guidelines allows sports to determine the impact on fair play. It has been consistent in its opinion that the use of testosterone and participation of male to female transgender athletes in our sport compromises fair play. Therefore, it falls under that ruling, and that the U.S. Powerlifting Association does not have to allow transgender athletes according to their rules and regulations. However, because of the court ruling in March, they had to create a little footnote there that if you're competing in Minnesota, that it does not apply to Minnesota competitions. Here again, we have a court ruling forcing a private organization to allow something against its own rules. Why is the government intervening in private organizations? Why is this agenda being shoved down the throats of the American people? And why should women be forced to share their competitive platform with males who fail to succeed at doing well in male sports to be on their platform? Now, we cannot turn a blind eye to facts and allow the destruction of women's sports because it will benefit no one. I'm not saying that trans athletes do not have a place in sports. I'm absolutely not. I'm all for trans athletes having their own category to compete against one another. But to have a transgender male who identifies as female to compete in any sport is absolutely not fair. And the USA Powerlifting Association does not even allow testosterone to be used. They are a drug-free organization. So clearly, a transgender male to female, although they may no longer be using, or may not be using testosterone, they may be using estrogen, no hormones are allowed in the USA Powerlifting Organization. And it says that clearly in their rules. But again, just taking into account those genetic differences that I discussed before, it is simply unfair to allow a transgender male to compete against a naturally born female. There is a LGBT powerlifting union which hosts a non-sanctioned powerlifting competition each year. So there is a place for them. And again, even if the USA Powerlifting or any other powerlifting organization or any other organization that wants to include transgender athletes, if the demand is there, they can. They can compete against one another however they wish. I'm a big proponent of health and fitness as a personal trainer, and I have dedicated over 20 years of my life to providing health and fitness information to athletes all across the world. And I would not deny any person the access to fitness and nutrition or a gym or anything like that, because I believe that everybody has the right to be a healthier and fitter person. With that being said, we cannot allow a delusional ideology, even at the court level, to allow the line between men and women to be crossed. Would you want your daughter or a grandmother subjected to a full-grown adult male in a locker room? Well, that's what's happening also across the nation. A California teen cried as she recalled seeing a naked man in her local YMCA, telling the city council in her San Diego suburb that she's been traumatized by the experience with the person she described as a trans woman. And then we have here this picture of this lady, this elderly lady, who also did not want to share a locker room with a trans male. And it is her right. It is your teenage daughter's right. It is every woman's right to feel safe and be able to change in the locker room and shower and be able to perform her business without worrying about a transgender male who identifies as a female being in their locker room. It's absolutely insane. If a transgender male would like to use a locker room, okay, go in a private locker room that is a single stall or something for you. But don't compromise the safety and security of the females. End of story. Because I can't tell you how many people might identify as trans and use that as an excuse to be in the locker room and be a pervert and who knows what, or take who knows what kind of pictures or whatnot. It's completely insane for this to be allowed, and everybody should feel safe and secure. End of story. So what can we do about it? Well, we should support organizations that stand firm on natural born gender roles in competition. Do not accept the infringement of your rights to privacy in designated areas. And this goes standing up for your grandmother, standing up for your daughter, standing up for the woman in your life who deserves to have her dignity and her privacy maintained. Speak out against policies and bring awareness to social media. Or start your own sports organization, which includes fair opportunities to compete. Do not live in a state which allows transgender male to female athletes compete in women's sports. If you want fair scholarship and competitive opportunities for the female athletes in your life. If moving would cause undue burden to you and your family, gather like-minded individuals and peacefully protest and lobby events, board meetings, congressional representatives, and government officials. Tell them you do not accept this treatment of the females in your life. You do not accept what's going on, this woke ideology to infiltrate your women's sports and locker rooms. Stand up for women in your life and refuse to have their safety and dignity compromised. And remember that silence denotes acceptance. Everyone has a woman in their life they care about, and it's up to you to stand up for what you know to be right and fair. Again, I am not saying that there is no room for transgender people in sports. I'm not saying that. Everybody has the right to compete, but everybody has the right to compete fairly, just like everybody has the right to use the locker room safely and securely and privately. Thank you for watching. Stand up for the females in your life. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and as always, ever forward.